Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today's talk I'm going to be covering 12th house, 12th Bhava symbolism, and this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective. If you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish in Sanskrit, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at birth charts, I published a video called Birth Chart Archive List 2024, where I list all the famous birth charts that I've analyzed on the channel so that they're easier to find. Because you wouldn't necessarily know, they're not all one-off videos. A lot of the birth charts I've analyzed are actually in my monthly videos. And so those are going to be, it's a list of birth charts of famous people, famous places, and famous moments in time. So if that's helpful or interesting to you, that's out there. Um, Videos to watch with or along with this one, before this one. North, South, and East Indian style charts. I do cover Western style charts in that video as well. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Introduction to the constellations or Rashis. Constellation or Rashi categories. Also the planets or grahas playlist. In that playlist, I would specifically look at the symbolism of Jupiter or Guru, because that's the ruling planet for the natural 12th house. And then if you want more content like this is the last of the 12 houses that I'm doing, but I will be adding more uh, videos to the Houses Bhavas playlist in terms of how do you how do you interpret birth charts, from a Bhava perspective, a house perspective, because that's a whole different level of interpretation analysis. And then if you're totally new to all the houses, I would start with the Lagna, which is also known as the Ascendant, Rising Sign, or First House, and then go on from there. Alrighty? Okay, so the 12th house, or Bhava, is also known as a Vyaya sthana. So Vyaya means loss. So the 12th house is the house of losses. The 12th house in the natural zodiac. So the natural zodiac is where you take the first constellation of Aries or Mesha, and you put it in the first house. And that's what I have on the right here. That little one. So the rising sign is the top diamond in the middle there. It has a little one in the bottom corner. That little one is not because it's the first house. That little one means that the first constellation of Aries or Mesha is in the first house. Okay. Now to get to the other houses, this is a North Indian style chart. You count counterclockwise. So you count 12 inclusively from the first house, blah, 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 all the way to the 12th house where that pink triangle is. That's going to be your 12th house in a North Indian style chart. Okay. So in the natural zodiac, again, when you have Aries, Mesha in the first house, the 12th house will be ruled by Pisces or Mina in Sanskrit. And Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, also known as Guru in Sanskrit. Now, Jupiter is a dual water sign. So dual meaning that there's kind of a mixed or contrasting points of view. And water is a lot of emotion. So there can be, mixed emotions here potentially. Okay. So the 12th house is a moksha sthana. So moksha means enlightenment or liberation, freedom. So when, for example, the ruling planet of the chart goes to the 12th house, the primary motivation of that person tends to be enlightenment or liberation, freedom. And this is again because there are a few different moksha sthanas, 3 different moksha sthanas. This is going to be the one that's considered sort of the highest level. Okay. Now, the 12th house is also considered a dushtana, so a house of suffering. And the other dushtanas are the 3rd house, 6th house, 8th house, and 12th house. So those 4 houses, 3, 6, 8, and 12, are considered to be, quote unquote, negative houses. They don't always have to be, depending on the context and placement of things. But yeah, the 12th house is included in that list of dushtanas. So regarding health, the 12th house, in terms of anatomy, relates to feet. It also relates to the left eye. The other thing is that because it's a house of losses, it can be the loss of, XYZ, anything really. So if you have planets in the 12th house, then you would start thinking about the symbolism of those planets and what they represent. So like, let's let's see, if there is Mars, for example, Mars can represent muscles, it can represent blood, it can also represent injuries and accidents. So if Mars is in the 12th house, you easily assume that the person is going to have losses through those things: loss of blood, loss of muscle, loss of, um, even like Mars can be considered the vitality. It's kind of a vigorous planet, vitality, that sort of thing, among other things. Yeah. Limbs in general are used here, although again, you can look at like arms would be like the third house typically, and the leg can kind of go 9, 10, 11, like different parts. Like 9 is like the thigh, and 10 is the knee, and then 11 is like the shin, lower leg, that sort of thing. Um, the other thing is sleep is on this list for health in the 12th house as well as sex. The reason why is because it's a house of losses. So when you're sleeping, that's a loss of consciousness, temporary loss of consciousness. And with sex, there's different losses there. So there's like a loss of fluids, typically, and then also like there can also be a loss of consciousness, like when people orgasm, that sort of thing. The other thing is from an Ayurvedic point of view. Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine. There's a loss of what's called ojas. Ojas. It's hard to translate ojas into English, and into other paradigms of medicine, but ojas is considered to be this kind of like subtle vital fluid that kind of is a protective fluid and kind of creates that glow that people have. It also helps to protect like the immune system and that sort of thing. So when people have too much sex, they can lose their ojas, and then it might actually start disrupting their immune system and their vitality. Um, Weakness of all kinds, of just general lack of vitality, can be seen in the 12th house, and then convalescence. So, times perhaps in which somebody is, in an isolated place, like maybe a hospital or maybe an assistant care facility or maybe like hospice, that sort of thing, can be indicated by the 12th house. All right, so regarding people, the 12th house can be related to hidden enemies. It's a reflection of the sixth house of overt enemies. Also, potentially, there can be like news about enemies. So, um, for example, if you're having a transit, or running a dasha or a planetary period or sub period of a certain planet, and it happens to be in, um, like the 12th house, especially if it's something like Mercury, which can be news and communication, or Jupiter, which can be news communication, but also like intuition, or like the moon. This could be somebody that, either hears through the grapevine or sort of intuitively gets hits about, what their enemies are up to. Also, the 12th house is related to a guru or teacher's residence. The reason why is that a guru or teacher, is typically assessed through the ninth house, which is also like religion, spirituality. And the fourth house of a chart is home. So fourth house from the ninth gives you teacher's house. So that's also, as we'll talk, about the 12th house. The 12th house can be related to isolated places and things like an ashram, which is sort of like a guru's house in a way, residence. That's where they spend a lot of their time. Um, Also on the list for the 12th house is acceptance of spouse and marriage. I put a question mark here because I don't use this. Maybe I should, but it's not very clear to me, who's doing the accepting here. Like, is it the person, the the person of the natal chart? Is it their family? Um, and then does it mean just like accepting marriage, or does it mean like accepting somebody throughout a marriage? So I'm not really clear on that, but it's on the list. So you have it too. And so maybe if you see enough birth charts and you do that kind of work, like maybe, a relationship synastry or something like that, that'll be helpful. So again, this is the house of losses. So all kinds of losses can be seen here. There can be falls like physical, social, professional. So any kind of fall or loss, misfortunes generally. This can be punishment, potentially, expenditures of all kinds. So, like, for example, if you have, like, we talked about Mars before, if you have Mars or like another kind of erratic planet like Rahu or Ketu, This can be like those are all three of those are kind of erratic planets or hidden, unexpected. They kind of have that energy. If you have any of those planets in the 12th house, you might get hit by various unexpected losses. Even if you try your best to straighten out your finances, those might just keep coming along. Or oppositely, contrastingly, if you had a planet in its own house, so a swa planet like maybe Venus in its own house, this is potentially a way to prevent losses through um, too many losses, like especially financially or something like that, where it's like that Venus in its own sign is gonna stop the like literal or figurative hemorrhaging of resources or money or whatever you're accessing there. Um, so speculative investments can be here. So meaning that sometimes people will spend money, so there's an outlay of money with the hope of getting a return on it down the line. So, it's like this spending money to gain money type energy here. There's also potentially like purchase of luxury items in this category or in this house. Um, and some people might see this as like luxury items. It's kind of like you're paying a premium for this item, it's seen as a luxury, even though there may not be an essential need for it, that sort of thing. The other thing is that, there can be good losses here, even financial good losses. So this could be like charity. So, again, if you had like maybe Venus in its own house on the 12th, uh, Venus in its own sign on the 12th, or you had Jupiter in its own sign on the 12th, those two planets generally indicate wealth and abundance and finances, and they're well placed. So this might be somebody who, is very charitable in nature. Okay, so the 12th house also indicates foreign or isolated places. So this might be like immigration, like if people have planets in the 12th house and they run those planets, then they might either immigrate, actually travel to a different country, or at least far away. It doesn't have to be like across the world. It could even be like California, New York, or something like that. It's still considered a foreign or isolated place if it's a place that you didn't grow up in, because you're not around people that you know. There might be different customs, language, manners, expectations, that sort of thing. So you kind of are starting all over again. So whatever you learned early on in life, you kind of have to push aside or toss aside and then kind of start over to fit in, and succeed in the new place. Also wandering from home. This is because this is so again, if the fourth house is home, uh, nine houses away is the ninth house indicates long distance travel. So ninth from the fourth would give you the 12th, so long distance travel from home. This could also be something like a pilgrimage, going on a long trip, like maybe going to Mecca or going on Hajj or something like that, or going, you know, what is it, the Camino in Spain or something like that. Those are all sort of different pilgrimages in different faiths. So when you have a planet or the 12th house activated, you might be more likely to engage in those things. Other things like hospitals, places of worship, because again, it's a bit of an isolated place where they kind of contain sick people, or places of worship. Usually there are worshipers there, so there's a specific subset of people. Prisons, it's obvious kind of isolated place, and confinement in general. So all of these things. So again, like with hospitals and stuff, like if this was a hospital worker, it might be like the 10th Lord, which is day to day, 9 to 5 work, has gone to the 12th house. That might be somebody who works in the hospital, especially if the 10th house is in Pisces. Is owned by Pisces, because Pisces is a place of isolated places. So the day to day work will be in an isolated place, and then even more so, it sort of doubles up by the 10th Lord going to the 12th. So this might even be somebody who works in overseas hospitals if you really want to, double up here. Um, in terms of meaning, symbolism, interpretation. Um, yeah, and then like secrets. So again, this is kind of like Losses, but again, there's this kind of hidden nature to the 12th house, partly because it's like Pisces, and Pisces can be about, it's even though it's like, often called a water sign, I kind of think of Pisces as like an ethereal sign. Because they're only, again, when we think about classical Jyotish, there's only four elements used to describe the 12 houses. So there's fire, there's earth, there's air, and then there's water. But in like Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, there's a fifth element of ether, which is space. And I always, again, I always think of Pisces as like space or ether because there's just something very mystical about it often, and subtle about it and kind of intangible about it. So, sometimes secrets can kind of be like that. It's sort of unspoken, experiences that are kind of float in the air but are not obvious, that kind of thing. Other kind of miscellaneous categories. So since the 12th house is the last house, this can symbolize a completion or ending of anything. Um, the other thing is, since this is the highest level of enlightenment, liberation, and endings, you could potentially assess the destination of the soul after death through this 12th house. Okay, now if we're going to talk about careers related to the 12th house, so if somebody has a very strong 12th house, or again, career indications are related to 12th house, then there are usually a few different categories associated with the 12th house career. So foreign things, as I mentioned, so anybody related to any kind of immigration issues like immigration lawyers or border patrol or visa workers, that sort of thing. People who use foreign languages, especially if the 12th house is related to like the second house of oral communication or the third house of written communication. Import export, that could be, especially if they have like Mercury placements, because Mercury represents business. Um, so also another career category is isolation. So hospital workers, correctional staff, creators or residents of retreat centers, ashrams, temples, any places of worship like that. They're a little bit, off the beaten trail and protected in some ways. Yeah. Also, since this is the house of losses and expenditures, you can get people who are like hedonists and even addicts here. So especially when I see Rahu or Ketu, which are planets that can indicate addiction and compulsion and stuff like that, obsession, then I might start thinking, because again, if you have Rahu or Ketu in the 12th house, that means you're going to have the other one, whichever one is not in the 12th house, is going to be in the 6th house of acute, issues and daily habits and stuff like that. And so, like, who am I thinking of? The whose chart I've analyzed. So Coco Chanel, if I remember correctly, I think she has Rahu and Ketu on the 6-12 axis, and she was actually, I think she was injecting heroin daily or smoking opium daily or something like that for most of her life. And who else's chart? Uh, Paganini, I did the Italian Italian what was it? Violinist, virtuoso. I mean, he had a lot of monetary losses, financial losses. He traveled all over Europe. He had a lot of, sexual partners and actually sexual diseases that came from that. He was also an addict, and he had a bunch of planets, and he had a bunch of planets in the 12th house, and he ran those planets as well. So, those are a couple of charts you can check out if you want to see like people with some pretty strong 12th house placements. And then also you can see like the hedonist and addicts, like, Coco Chanel was all about luxury items and, luxury clothes and living a luxurious life. Um, and Paganini was a gambler as well. So, you can see the relationship there. Then the last sort of category here for careers is donors and seekers. So this could be like people involved in charitable organizations or like charitable fund manager, that sort of thing, humanitarians, altruists, and also seekers and ascetics. So at some point, somebody might consciously decide, I'm just going to like let it all go, donate all my stuff, downsize to the bare minimum, like studio apartment or whatever I need to, survive in, and then let everything else go. and kind of release their attachment to stuff. I mean, you can be surrounded by stuff and not be attached to it, but some people, especially if they're more of a Saturnian type, they might go that route where it's just like, strip it bare, kind of thing. All right, so yeah, there you go. The 12th house symbolism. And it's kind of funny. I think this may be the shortest talk I've done on any of the houses. And it's sort of like I was thinking, why is that? Because it seems like the 12th house is so deep and rich in meaning. But again, it might even be like literally like a loss of words. Like some things you can't always describe, some things are beyond the confines of the meanings of words and expression, physical expression, the way that we typically use them day to day. So maybe the 12th house energy is filtering through even what I'm describing here, possibly. All right, so there you go. As always, thank you for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. All my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concept plays. They can be found there. If you're looking for more famous birth charts to look at, study, analyze, check out my birth chart archive list 2024 video for a list of all the videos or a list of all the birth charts that I've analyzed on the channel so you can find them more easily. I do offer personal birth chart readings live on Zoom and as pre-recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightaster@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, which includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care. So, as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, helpful, and useful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So, until the next one, take care. Namaste.